Today, we are doing a lightning fast lesson on linear functions, and this is definitely something that you learned in high school, so this will be a bit of a review. Linear function is just one whose graph is a line, and when a mathematician says a line, we mean a perfectly straight line, so something like this, or a nice horizontal line, not something curvy like this, which is what a mathematician would call a curve. So we're not talking about this kind of thing here. And in general, a linear function has the equation y equals mx plus b. So that will sound familiar to you. Okay, so you might have like y equals 2x plus 3, or it could be that you have negative 1/3 x minus 1, something like that. Those numbers can be positive and negative, but the m and the b are numbers. And the m is what we call the slope of the line. And the b gives us the y-intercept of the line. So the y-intercept is always at the point 0, comma b. All right, so because of this, we call this the slope-intercept form of a line. And so this is the slope-intercept form of the equation of a line. So I said we were going to use the letter m to represent the slope of the line, and a slope is just a numerical measure of how steep the line is. So you might remember from high school that the slope is equal to rise over run. So what does that mean? I've got a line graphed here through some generic points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. So the rise and the run are the distances we have to travel to stay on the line, going from one point to the next. So if I'm going from x1, y1 to x2, y2, I would have to go up this amount of distance. This is my rise. And then I'd have to run this amount here just to stay on the line. And so we take those two distances and divide them to get our number m that tells us how steep the line is. And the rise, if you look at the y-axis as a ruler, you can think of the rise as being the difference between those two y coordinates, y2 minus y1. And the run, if you think of the x-axis as a ruler, will tell you about how far you have to go in the x direction, x2 minus x1. We'll subtract those two. So this is where we get that slope formula that probably looks familiar from high school. The rise is equal to y2 minus y1. The run is x2 minus x1. And that'll be our formula that we use for slope. Once we know how to calculate slope, finding the equation of a line passing through 2 points is pretty easy. We're going to start off by calculating slope. So here I've got these 2 points, negative 3, 1 and 6, 4. We're going to calculate the slope passing through those 2 points. And it doesn't really matter which point you call x1, y1, and which one you call x2, y2. You just can't mix and match those subscripts. All right, so our formula says to take y2 minus y1. So we're going to take 4 minus 1. x2 minus x1 is going to give me 6 minus a negative 3. So that's going to give me 3 up top. And then 6 minus a negative 3 is 6 plus 3. That's 9. 3/9. That's a fraction I can reduce, divide top and bottom by 3, and I get 1/3. All right, so my slope is 1/3. That means the equation of my line is going to be y equals mx plus b, 1/3 x plus b. So the only thing I have to figure out now is what is the value of b? And there's lots of different ways to do this. And if you have a way that you like better than my way, that's fine. Just do it the way you learned in high school. As long as you get the same line that I get and you can show your work, then that's fine. I do this by plugging in a point, and I'm going to pick 6, 4 only because it doesn't have any negative numbers in it. It doesn't matter which one you choose to plug in by this method. So I'm going to plug in x equals 6 and y equals 4, and that's going to force this equation to tell me what the value of b has to be. So I'm going to plug in y equals 4. I know my slope is 1/3. I'm going to plug in 6 for x, and then I'm going to solve that equation for b. So I've got 4. 1/3 times 6, think of that 6 as being 6 over 1. 6 over 3 would give me 2. And then I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. And I get 2 is equal to b. Like I said, there's lots of other ways to figure out that b is equal to 2. If you have a different way of doing it, that's fine. This tells me, together with what I had before, that my equation is 1/3 x plus 2. One last note about slope. When you make that rise over run calculation, 4 different things can happen. You can get a positive number, a negative number, 0, or something undefined. So let's think about positive. If you got a positive rise over run, that means that your rise and your run both agreed about the direction you were going. What I mean is you either got a positive number for rise and a positive number for run, or they were both negative so that the negatives canceled out and you got a positive number. So if you've got rise over run both being positive, that means you're going in the positive y direction and the positive x direction to stay on your line. If it's negative over negative, that means you're going in the negative y direction and the negative x direction to stay on your line. Either way, your line is going to rise from left to right. So you're going to have something that looks like this. Negative slope means that the signs disagreed on top and bottom. So you either got a rise over run that was positive and negative, or vice versa, negative over positive. So if you're going positive rise and negative run, or negative rise and positive run, your line is falling from left to right. In both of those cases with positive slope and negative slope, all of those kinds of lines are going to have that y equals mx plus b equation to them. When the slope is 0 or undefined, the equations look a little bit different. Let's think about a line that has 0 slope. That means that your rise must have been equal to 0. So when you do rise over run, if you get a 0 rise, it really doesn't matter what you get for run. 0 divided by anything is equal to 0. Okay, so think about a line that has 0 rise and it's all run. That's a horizontal line. Okay, so 0 slope is synonymous with horizontal lines. Those equations are just going to be y equals a number, the y-intercept. So we'll say that's y equals b, because every line, every point on that line is going to have the same y coordinate, y equals 5, y equals -2, something like that. Our last case is an undefined slope, and this is going to correspond to a vertical line. And this is going to be a line that's all rise and no run. So when you do that rise over run calculation, you get rise over nothing. You can't divide by 0. So this slope is undefined or doesn't exist. And sometimes we use the letters D and E. Undefined and D and E, those are going to mean the same thing. This line just doesn't have a slope. It does not exist. There is no such thing as slope for this line. And these lines are going to have the equation x equals a number. We'll say x equals a, and that a is going to be the x-intercept. Every single point on that line is going to have the same x coordinate, x equals 10, x equals -5, something like that. That's going to be your vertical line.